The room was cold, colder than anything he had ever felt before. The walls curved like the inside of some alien shell, glowing faintly with white and silver light. Strange machines hummed all around, blinking with green and red signals that seemed alive, watching every breath he took. He tried to move, but thick metal bands locked his arms and legs to a table. His chest rose and fell too fast, his heart beating like a drum in his ears. This was not a dream. This was not a nightmare. This was real. The aliens stood in a circle around him. Their bodies were tall and thin, their skin gray and smooth like polished stone. Their eyes were black pools with no light inside them, and, when they whispered to each other, their voices echoed as if the air itself bent to their language. He could not understand their words, but he understood their tone. It was not comfort. It was not care. It was control. He was not a guest here. He was not even a patient. He was a subject. They had told him one simple line when they dragged him into this place. It is only a test. But every nerve in his body screamed that it was more than that. A test did not need chains. A test did not need needles as long as his arm. A test did not need lights that burned into his skin like fire. This was something deeper, something hidden, something dangerous. One of the aliens approached the table. Its long hands held a silver tube filled with a glowing blue liquid. The color pulsed like a living heart, and for a moment he swore he could feel it call to him. He shook his head, pulled against the restraints, but the metal held. The alien pressed the tube into a device above his arm. A sharp hiss filled the air, and the blue liquid rushed into his veins. He gasped. The cold spread fast. His body shook, as if ice water flooded every muscle. His teeth clenched, his eyes watered, and for a heartbeat he felt like he would die right there on the table. But death did not come. Instead, heat followed. A burning heat that crawled under his skin, down his spine, across his chest. His heart slammed harder. His breath tore in and out of his lungs, and the ceiling above him blurred. The alien stepped back and began writing on glowing tablets. They watched his pain like scientists watching fire in a cage. No concern, no fear, only curiosity. He was an animal to them, nothing more. Minutes dragged like hours. The heat did not fade. It grew. It crawled deeper, pushing into his bones, his blood, his brain. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. His throat locked. His hands twisted in the restraints, fingers clawing at the air. His vision split in two, then three, then four. For a moment he could see everything in the room at once, the walls, the lights, the aliens, the door he would never reach. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. His chest fell. His eyes blinked. The burning vanished, leaving behind only silence. He lay there, sweat dripping down his face, his skin trembling as if he had been in a storm. The restraints unlocked with a loud click. The aliens turned away as if nothing had happened, as if his suffering was just a line in their report. One gestured to him with a long finger, its voice low and sharp. Return. He sat up slowly, every muscle weak, his arms shaking as he pushed off the table. The room tilted. The lights burned his eyes. His legs carried him like they were not his own. He stumbled, but the aliens did not help. They did not care. He was alive, and that was all they needed. Back in his small quarters, he collapsed onto the bed. His chest heaved, his throat dry, his heart still wild in his chest. He pressed his hand against his skin, and that was when he felt it. His pulse was too strong, too fast, too heavy. It was not the pulse of a normal man. It was louder, deeper, like the beating of something more powerful. He tried to ignore it. He told himself it was fear, nothing more. Fear could do strange things. Fear could make a man believe in monsters. But when he lifted the cup of water from the table, his hand shook, and the cup crushed in his grip. Water spilled down his arm. Sharp edges of broken metal cut into his palm. But even as the blood dripped, the wound closed. The skin sealed before his eyes, leaving behind nothing but a faint red line that faded in seconds. His breath caught. He stared at his hand. This was not fear. This was not his mind playing tricks. Something had changed. Something inside him was alive, moving, growing. The words echoed in his head, the same words the aliens had spoken when they brought him in. It is only a test. But he knew now. It was never just a test. It was the beginning of something far worse. And deep inside, under his skin and inside his blood, the change was already starting. The hours after the injection crawled by like shadows stretching across the floor. He lay in his narrow bunk staring at the ceiling, waiting for the storm inside his body to calm. But it did not calm. It grew. His chest felt heavy, his heart pounding with unnatural rhythm, each thump echoing through his bones as if trying to break free. His skin prickled like static, his breath shallow, and his mind kept circling back to the moment the blue liquid entered his veins. He wanted to believe it was over, but deep down he knew the test had only begun. When he finally stood, his legs shook but carried him to the mirror fixed to the wall. The reflection staring back was his, but not the same. His eyes seemed brighter, catching the dim light in ways they never had before. He leaned closer and saw tiny golden flecks spinning inside his irises like dust in sunlight. He blinked, rubbed his eyes, but they remained. His hand touched the mirror, trembling. For a long moment he could not look away. Then came the sound. A whisper. Not from the room, not from the corridor outside, but from somewhere deep inside his head. It was faint at first, like wind through distant trees. Then sharper, clearer. Words he could not understand, spoken in a tongue not human. He covered his ears, but the voice followed, curling through his mind like smoke. Panic struck his chest. He stumbled back, his foot kicking the metal cup he had crushed earlier. It rolled, clanged, and spun in circles until it stopped at his feet. He stared at it, his breathing quick, and whispered to himself, "I'm losing my mind." But madness could not explain what happened next. He picked up the cup, its edges still sharp where he had broken it, and pressed it against his palm on purpose, desperate to prove something. The edge sliced his skin, blood pooling quickly. Pain bit hard, but almost instantly the skin drew closed. The wound sealed as if invisible hands stitched it together. Within seconds the cut was gone. His blood vanished. His skin looked untouched. He gasped and fell back against the wall, clutching his hand as if it still burned. The whisper inside. His head grew louder, echoing like a chant. He could not understand the words, but he felt the intent. It was not warning. It was not kindness. It was command. His knees weakened. He pressed his head into the cold wall and whispered, "No, no, no." Sleep came only in fragments. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw images. Alien skies filled with black ships, strange creatures bowing before shadows, burning cities collapsing under fire. He saw himself in the visions, standing among the ruins, his body glowing with the same blue light now burning in his veins. He woke screaming, sweat dripping down his face, his throat raw. The next morning, 2 aliens entered his quarters. Their faces were blank, their eyes bottomless. They gave no words, only a gesture to follow. His body obeyed, though his mind screamed, to resist. He followed them down a long corridor of glass where stars shone outside, endless and cold. Other humans walked in silence along the halls, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Some looked broken, others mad. None dared speak. He wanted to ask them if they too felt the voices, if they too had seen the visions. But fear sealed his lips. The aliens led him into a room filled with machines. Strange helmets hung from cables glowing with blue veins of light. One was lowered onto his head before he could fight. The world vanished in a storm of light. His mind was pulled apart, every thought, every memory stretched thin like paper in fire. The voices returned, stronger now, drilling into his skull. He clenched his fists, screamed, but the sound never reached his throat. In the darkness of his mind, he saw himself again, but taller, stronger, no longer human. His muscles swelled, his skin cracked with light, his voice thundered like storms. The alien stood before him in the vision, bowing, whispering a single word again and again. Weapon, weapon, weapon. The helmet lifted. He collapsed to the floor, gasping, his body drenched in sweat. The aliens stared down at him, their expressions unreadable. One spoke in its low tone, its black eyes unblinking. Progress. Then they turned and left him there, broken, shivering, on the ground. He pushed himself to his knees. The whispers lingered, his muscles trembled. His vision shimmered with colors that did not belong to this world. His breath caught as he realized the truth. This was no test of science. This was no study. This was creation. The aliens were building something inside him. They were reshaping him piece by piece until there would be nothing left of the man he once was. His hand clenched into a fist, veins glowing faint blue under his skin. For the first time, the thought came not as fear but as a question. What if I cannot stop it? What if this is not a curse but a beginning? The days blurred into each other, but he knew time was passing because the changes never stopped. Every morning, his reflection looked less like the man he remembered and more like something new, something sharp, something powerful. His muscles no longer felt weak. They seemed carved from stone, every movement stronger than before. His hearing sharpened so much that he could catch the faint hum of machinery buried deep in the alien walls, even the steady heartbeat of the guards outside. His door echoed in his skull like drums. At first he tried to deny it. He told himself these were only side effects, temporary, soon to fade. But then the voices returned, louder than before. They spoke when he was awake. They whispered when he slept. He still could not understand their words, but the intent was always clear: command, control, ownership. They wanted him to obey, and worst of all, part of him wanted to listen. One night, as he sat on the edge of his bed gripping his knees, the whisper turned into something sharper, a voice that felt like it came from inside his chest rather than his head. It told him to stand. Without thinking, he obeyed. It told him to raise his hand. He did. The lights in the room flickered and burst, sparks showering down as if the circuits feared him. He froze, staring at his hand. Energy pulsed under his skin, glowing faint blue like the liquid they had forced into his veins. For a long time he could only whisper to himself, "What are they turning me into?" The next day, the scientists tested him again. They strapped him into another room, wires pressed against his chest, strange helmets hovering over his head. They asked him to lift objects, first small weights, then heavy blocks of metal. Each time he obeyed, and each time his strength defied reason. Metal that once required 2 men to carry now felt like paper in his hands. The aliens wrote notes rapidly, their black eyes never blinking. But strength was not the only thing. When they tried to measure his speed, his body moved before his mind could think. He dodged objects hurled at him, not because he saw them, but because he felt them before they moved. His skin tingled seconds before impact, his muscles responding, faster than thought. The aliens recorded everything, whispering words that sounded like triumph. That night, when they sent him back to his quarters, he sat in silence. His chest rose and fell slowly, his hands resting on his knees. He was no longer afraid of what his body could do. Fear had turned into something else, curiosity. And with curiosity came danger. Because a thought began to bloom inside his mind, a dangerous thought. If I can feel the world before it moves, if I can bend light and break steel, what else can I do? The whisper inside him answered. This time, it was not alien. This time, it was his own voice, twisted and heavy. It told him to push harder. It told him to reach further. He stood again, lifted his hand and closed his eyes. The walls trembled. The floor cracked under his feet. The air thickened with invisible weight, making the room groan like the ship itself was afraid. When he opened his eyes, blue sparks danced. At his fingertips, he pulled back, gasping, collapsing against the bed. His heart hammered, but not from fear, from hunger. Hunger for more. The next morning, he walked past another test subject, a man with hollow eyes and shaking hands. The man whispered, "They are making us into monsters." He wanted to agree, but the words died in his throat. Because deep down, he knew it was not only horror. There was something thrilling about the power coursing through his body, something that called to him like fire to a moth. Yet with the thrill came a shadow. Every time he felt stronger, every time he let the sparks dance under his skin, the voice grew louder, not the alien one, his own. A voice that said, "Why fight it? Why not accept it? Why not become what they want you to be?" But another thought pushed back, faint but sharp. If I accept, I am theirs forever. If I resist, maybe I stay human. That war raged inside him as the stars outside the glass corridors shone cold and indifferent. He was no longer just a subject. He was no longer just a man. He was something in between, caught between evolution and imprisonment, between freedom and control. And as he lay in bed that night, the final whisper came. Not from aliens, not from within, but from the future he could almost see. One day you will have to choose, remain human, or become the weapon they fear. The truth came to him not by accident, but by chance. That night, when the corridors fell silent and the lights dimmed into pale blue, he heard voices outside his door. The aliens spoke in low tones, their language sharp and heavy. But this time something inside his mind twisted the sounds into meaning. At first he thought it was another trick of madness, but the words became clearer, as if the changes in his body had unlocked a key. He froze, leaning against the cold wall, listening. The scientists were not speaking of medicine, nor healing, nor harmless tests. They spoke of weapons, of soldiers, of war. They called him the prototype. They whispered of armies shaped in the image of man, bound by alien control, bodies fused with energy and blood not of Earth. And then one word cut him deeper than all others, weaponized. His stomach turned. His hands trembled. The puzzle pieces fell into place, and the picture was more terrifying than he had ever imagined. They had never cared about him as a person. They had not cared about Earth, about humanity, about life. This was never about discovery. It was about domination, and he was their first success. Rage rose in his chest like fire. He pressed his fist into the wall, veins glowing faintly under his skin. The metal cracked under his touch, a thin fracture spreading like a spider's web. He pulled his hand back, staring at the mark he had left. The aliens wanted a weapon, and he realized with cold horror they had already built one. The next morning, the tests were different. No longer small weights, no longer reflex checks. They put him in a vast chamber, the walls lined with machines, the floor lit with glowing grids. Alien guards stood at the edges, their weapons humming with deadly energy. A scientist pointed at a heavy cube of solid black metal in the center of the room. Its surface glistened as if it had swallowed the light itself. "Lift," the alien commanded. He walked forward, his heart pounding. The cube was massive, heavier than any human could dream of moving. He placed his hands against it, bracing himself. The voices whispered in his mind, pushing him onward, urging him to obey. He clenched his teeth, pulled, and the cube rose into the air like a feather. The chamber filled with alien murmurs. Their black eyes gleamed with triumph. He stood there holding something no human should ever lift, and in that moment he understood. This was not a test. This was proof. Proof that their weapon worked. When he dropped the cube, the floor shook. He turned, and for the first time he saw pride on the faces of the aliens. Not pride in him, but in themselves. They had shaped him, broken him, built him. He was their creation now. But something inside him snapped. His chest burned, his veins lit blue, and energy rushed through him. He saw their faces not as creators, but as jailers, and the word echoed in his head again. Weapon. He was supposed to obey. But rage surged higher than fear. He clenched his fists and the air rippled. The lights flickered, the walls groaned. The aliens stepped back, their eyes wide. He whispered to himself, his voice shaking, "I am not your weapon." But another voice answered from within, colder, stronger. You already are. That night, alone in his quarters, he could not rest. His mind spun with the revelation. Every detail was clear now. The injections, the helmets, the visions, they were not mistakes. They were blueprints. He was designed, piece by piece, to become something Earth had never seen. Something the galaxy would one day fear. He pressed his hand against his chest, feeling the power throb like a second heart. His reflection in the mirror stared back at him, eyes glowing faintly, veins shining under the skin, a body no longer only human. He felt the war inside him, the man who wanted freedom and the creation that wanted control. The voices whispered again, promising strength, power, survival. But survival at what cost? If he gave in, if he embraced what they made him, he would no longer belong to himself. He would belong to them. And worse, he would belong to the voice growing louder inside his own mind. The revelation sank deep into his bones. He was not sick. He was not hallucinating. He was evolving, but not by choice. They had stolen his humanity, twisted it into something else, and he was powerless to stop the change. Yet as fear consumed him, one thought flickered like a spark in the dark. If they had built him into a weapon, then maybe he could turn that weapon against them. The alarms began before dawn. A low wail spread through the alien facility, rising and falling like the cry of some mechanical beast. Red lights flashed across the corridors, bathing the cold walls in blood-colored glow. At first, he thought, it was another test, another cruel game meant to measure his fear. But then he saw the guards running, their long legs carrying them swiftly, their weapons charged with frantic light. Something was happening, something outside their plan, and he felt it burn in his chest like fire. They pulled him from his quarters, 3 aliens gripping his arms with icy strength. His feet dragged across the floor as they rushed him toward the chamber. He could feel the hum of machines growing louder ahead, the same chamber where they had tested his strength, his speed, his mind. But today was different. The air smelled of smoke, the walls trembled under distant impacts, and every alien face he passed carried something he had never seen before. Fear. When they strapped him to the platform in the center of the room, he felt the restraints clamp shut around his wrists and ankles. Heavy machines surrounded him, glowing with blue veins of energy. Above, a massive sphere pulsed, dripping light like liquid. The scientists worked quickly, their hands sliding across controls, their eyes darting to each other in silence. He knew this was not another experiment. This was activation. The voices inside his head grew louder, almost unbearable now, chanting in alien rhythm, pushing him to surrender. But then, through the storm of whispers, a single thought rose in his own voice, sharp and clear. No more chains. Something inside him snapped. His heart slammed like a hammer and blue fire spread through his veins. The restraints hissed as cracks appeared along their edges. The scientists shouted, alarms shrieked, and the sphere above poured light down onto him. It seared his skin, but instead of pain, power filled his body. His muscles flexed against the steel, and with a roar that shook the chamber, the restraints shattered like glass. The energy burst outward in a violent wave. Consoles exploded, guards were hurled against walls, and sparks rained from the ceiling. The aliens staggered back, their black eyes wide with shock. For the first time, the scientists, who had treated him like an object, stared at him with terror. He stood tall in the center of the destruction, his chest rising and falling, his veins glowing like rivers of fire beneath his skin. One guard raised his weapon and fired. A beam of burning light streaked across the chamber, but before it could reach him, his hand rose on instinct. The beam bent in midair, shattering against the wall. He gasped, staring at his hand, then clenched it into a fist. The power was not theirs anymore. It was his. The room became chaos. Guards rushed in, their weapons blazing, but he moved faster than thought. Every strike they made missed as he darted between them, his body stronger, sharper, faster than any human should be. He grabbed one weapon and it dissolved in his grip, the metal melting under the heat of his energy. Another guard tried to strike him from behind, but he spun, his fist connecting with a crack that sent the creature crumpling to the floor. The alarm screamed louder, the walls trembling as if the facility itself was breaking apart. Smoke filled the air, sparks showered down, and still he stood unbroken. Every test, every injection, every nightmare they had forced into him, it had all led here. They wanted a weapon they could control. Instead, they had made a storm they could never cage. As the last guard fell, the scientists huddled together at the far side of the chamber, their black eyes wide with terror. One of them raised its hands, speaking in a trembling voice. "You were made for us. You belong to us." He stepped forward slowly, his glowing eyes burning into theirs. His voice was steady, filled with fury. "I belong to no one." The floor shook as another surge of power rolled through him. He felt the walls crack, the ceiling groan. The machines sparked and died, unable to contain what he had become. The scientists scattered, running like insects as he tore through the chamber. Smoke and fire swallowed the room as he forced open the heavy doors. The corridor stretched ahead, filled with guards rushing to block his path. But this time he did not feel fear. He felt something else. Freedom. Each step carried the weight of every chain they had placed on him, every drop of blue fire they had pumped into his blood. Now it was his to command. And with that power he would break through every wall, every barrier, until nothing stood between him and the stars. The corridor stretched ahead like a tunnel of fire and shadows. Sparks rained from broken cables, smoke coiled along the walls, and alarms screamed like dying animals. Behind him, the chamber lay in ruins, filled with wreckage and fear. Ahead, only the unknown. His body trembled, but not from weakness, because power coursed through his veins like a second heartbeat, burning brighter with every step. The aliens were not finished with him. As he pushed deeper into the facility, squads of guards appeared, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. They fired, beams of white light slicing the air. But he no longer flinched. The energy bent, curved, shattered against invisible barriers that rose around him like instinct. His hands moved without thought, sending shockwaves through the air that hurled the guards aside like leaves in a storm. Each battle left him shaken, not by pain, but by realization. He was no longer fighting like a man. He was moving like something else, something born for destruction. Every punch, every burst of power came too easily, too naturally. The weapon they had tried to build was awake, and it was inside him. He broke through doors, tore down walls, until at last he reached the outer ring of the station. A massive window stretched before him, revealing the endless stars. Beyond the glass, warships floated in silence, alien vessels armed with weapons that glowed like suns. The sight should have filled him with dread, but instead, a strange calm settled over him. Because he felt deep in his bones that none of those ships could stop him now. Behind him, footsteps echoed. The scientists had followed, their robes torn, their faces pale. One of them stepped forward, voice trembling but defiant. "You are ours. You are the future we created. Without us, you are nothing." He turned, his glowing eyes meeting theirs. For a moment, silence stretched across the burning hall. Then he spoke, his voice steady as steel. "You didn't create me. You only unlocked what was already there." The scientists' eyes widened, and for the first time, fear broke their cold mask. They had tried to make a weapon they could control. Instead, they had woken something far greater, something even they could not predict. The station shuddered violently, another alarm roaring. Fire licked at the walls. He looked once more at the stars beyond the glass. Freedom was there. Freedom and danger. If he escaped, what then? Could he return to Earth? Could he stand among humans when his veins glowed with alien fire, when his hands could tear steel and bend light? Would they welcome him as a savior or fear him as a monster? The voices inside his head returned, softer now but insistent. They whispered of destiny, of power, of a galaxy trembling before him. He clenched his fists, resisting the pull. He did not want destiny. He wanted choice. He wanted to decide for himself who he was. With one final breath, he pressed his palm against the glass. Blue energy surged from his skin, cracks spreading like lightning. The window shattered outward, and the void of space roared in. He leapt into the cold embrace of the stars, his body burning with energy, propelling him beyond the ruins of the alien station. The ships outside turned their weapons on him, but he soared between them, faster than their eyes could follow. Explosions lit the darkness, but none touched him. He moved like fire through the night, unstoppable, unchained. And yet even as freedom filled his chest, a shadow lingered. Because power like this could not stay hidden. The galaxy would come for him. The aliens would hunt him. Earth itself might turn against him if they knew what he had become. He was free, but his future was uncertain, his path unmarked. As the stars stretched endlessly before him, one question echoed louder than all the whispers, louder than the chaos he left behind. Was he the savior humanity needed, or the horror it could never survive?